in the heart of the Vietnam War, amidst the dense jungles of the Central Highlands in 1969. A routine Medevac mission takes a terrifying turn. What begins as a standard operation for a U.S. Army pilot quickly descends into a harrowing encounter with a creature beyond comprehension. This is not just another war story. It's a chilling tale of survival against an unknown entity that stalks the shadows of warfare. My hands trembled slightly as I ran through the pre-flight checklist one more time. 6 months since my last crash, and the nightmares still hadn't stopped. The screams of my crew as we went down echoed in my head every night. "All good, Brooks." Lieutenant Karen Lee's voice pulled me back to reality. Her eyes met mine with that steady gaze that had kept me sane through a dozen hot extractions. I nodded, wiping sweat from my brow. "Just making sure we don't have another incident." The chopper vibrated beneath my feet, a Huey that had seen better days, the smell of fuel and metal mixed with the ever-present jungle rot that permeated everything in Vietnam. The air tasted like copper and mildew. "This humidity is killing my smokes," Sergeant Mike O'Connor complained, loading the last of the medical supplies into our chopper. He slammed a crate down harder than necessary, making me flinch. How am I supposed to save lives with soggy cigarettes? PFC Luis Ramirez, our door gunner, clicked his M60 into place for the third time. The kid's hands moved with practiced precision, but the tension in his jaw gave him away. Second week in country, and already jumping at shadows. "You good, Ramirez?" I asked. "Yes, sir. Ready to fly." His voice cracked slightly. The sound of boots on metal announced Specialist Rachel Adams, our comms officer. Her normally neat uniform was already darkened with sweat patches. "Mission brief, sir. 4 critically wounded at Firebase Bravo, Central Highlands. They need immediate evac." I took the papers, scanning the coordinates. A routine mission. But nothing was routine in Vietnam, 1969. "Weather?" I asked, eyeing the gathering clouds. "Storms moving in," Lee answered. "We need to get airborne now if we want to beat them." I swallowed hard, pushed back the memories, and climbed into the pilot's seat. Just another day in the war. Just another Medevac. The Huey lifted off with a familiar shudder that traveled up my spine. Rain had started falling, fat drops that smacked against the windshield and dripped from the edges of my helmet. The rhythmic thump, thump, thump of the rotors was my heartbeat, the only constant I could trust anymore. "ETA 20 minutes to Firebase Bravo," Lee announced beside me, her voice steady in my headset. We passed over endless green jungle, occasional clearings revealing the scars of war, bomb craters, burned villages, abandoned firebases. The highlands rose before us, shrouded in mist and storm clouds. Static suddenly hissed through my headset as we passed over a particular valley. "What the hell?" I adjusted frequencies, twisted dials. "Adams, check the radio." "On it, sir," she replied from behind. "That's weird. I'm getting interference on all bands." Lightning flashed, illuminating the jungle canopy below. For a moment, I could swear I saw something large moving through the trees. Something that didn't match any vehicle or animal I knew. I blinked, and it was gone. "You see that?" I asked Lee. "See what?" "Nothing. Just shadows." The helicopter suddenly shuddered violently, causing all of us to grab for support. Warning lights flashed across the console. "What's happening?" Ramirez shouted. "I don't know." I fought with the controls. "Lee, readings?" "Nothing makes sense, sir. Fuel pressure dropping, but fuel tanks read full. Engine temperature fluctuating wildly." Another flash of lightning, and something passed overhead. Something dark and massive that cast a shadow over us. Impossible at this altitude. The radio crackled, and through the static came a sound that froze my blood. Not words, not any language I knew. Just breathing. Deep, rhythmic, inhuman breathing. Alarms screamed across the console. The engine coughed, sputtered, died. "Mayday, mayday!" Adams shouted into her headset. "Dust off 7-3 going down." Only static answered. "Something's wrong with the fuel line," I yelled, though I'd checked it myself before takeoff. The Huey lurched sickeningly. "We're dropping too fast." Lee's voice remained impossibly calm. "There's a clearing 2 clicks east." I wrestled with the controls, feeling the helicopter fight me like a living thing. We were falling, spinning slowly. The rain hammered against the metal skin of the chopper, drowning out everything except the alarms and my own thundering heartbeat. "Brace for impact!" I shouted. We hit the trees first. The sound of metal tearing and wood splintering filled my ears. Branches slapped against the windshield, one cracking it. The rotors screamed as they shredded through foliage before snapping off. Then we hit the ground. My head slammed forward, then back. Something warm trickled down my face. Blood. The taste of it filled my mouth, where I'd bitten my cheek. "Sound off," I managed, unbuckling myself. "Lee here." Her voice came from beside me, strained but steady. "O'Connor, I'm okay." He sounded dazed. "Ramirez, good." The kid was pale, but unharmed. "Adams." "My arm." Her voice broke into a pained gasp. I turned to see her cradling her right arm, bent at an unnatural angle. O'Connor moved toward her, his medical training kicking in, despite the gash on his own forehead. Night was coming fast. Darkness gathered under the trees surrounding our small clearing, and with it came sounds. Not normal jungle sounds, not birds or monkeys or insects. Something else. Something moving methodically around the perimeter of the crash site. Heavy footsteps that stopped occasionally, as if whatever made them was listening. Watching. "What is that?" Ramirez whispered, clutching his M60. "Probably VC," I said, not believing it myself. "Everyone stay alert." But the footsteps didn't sound human. They sounded bigger. We formed a defensive circle around the downed Huey. The rain had stopped, but water still dripped from leaves, creating a constant patter that made every sound suspect. The smell of fuel and hydraulic fluid mixed with the wet earth and vegetation. I tried the radio again. "Mayday, mayday. This is Dust Off 7-3. We are down. Repeat, we are down." Nothing but that strange static, punctuated by sounds that almost formed words. Almost, but not quite, like someone speaking underwater, in a language I'd never heard. "Sir?" Ramirez's voice was tight with fear. "Movement at the tree line." I swung my flashlight toward where he pointed. For an instant, the beam caught something tall, much taller than a man, standing between 2 trees. It moved with deliberate grace, disappearing before I could make out details. "VC don't move like that," Lee whispered beside me. "And they're not 8 feet tall," O'Connor added. "It was just shadows," I insisted, but my mouth had gone dry. O'Connor moved toward the tail section of the helicopter, then called out, "Brooks, you need to see this." Deep gouges marked the metal. 4 parallel lines, 2 high up and 2 deep to be from the crash. "What could do that?" Adams asked, her face pale with pain and fear. "Something big," O'Connor replied. "Something with claws." Lee returned from checking her navigation gear. "I found this." She held out a water-stained journal. It was stuck in with my maps, not mine. I flipped it open, shining my light on the pages. The handwriting was jagged, hurried. March 4th, 1969. Mechanical failure over Sector 16. Emergency landing successful. Strange sounds at night. Something watching us. March 5th. It stays just out of sight. Mimics radio calls. Johnson swears it called his name. March 6th. It's hunting us from above. God help us. The final entry broke off mid-sentence. I looked up at my crew. We move at first light. Rescue will be looking for us at Firebase Bravo, not here. We need to get to higher ground for radio contact. But deep down, I knew something else. We weren't alone in this jungle, and we weren't the first to crash here. Dawn broke gray and misty. I stepped outside the helicopter and froze. Surrounding our camp were footprints, massive indentations in the mud that hadn't been there the night before. I crouched to examine them. 18 inches long at least, bipedal, with strange claw marks at the ends. Just a bear, I told the others when they saw them, but I knew better. Bears don't walk exclusively on hind legs, and these prints formed a perfect circle around our camp, as if whatever made them had paced all night, watching us. We fashioned a stretcher for Adams from broken helicopter parts and tarps. Her arm was splinted, but the pain made her drift in and out of consciousness. O'Connor administered morphine from his kit, his movements mechanical. His eyes kept darting to the surrounding jungle. "Let's move," I ordered, pointing to the rising terrain to the east. Higher ground means better radio contact. The jungle closed around us within minutes of leaving the clearing. The air hung heavy and wet in my lungs. Vegetation slapped against my face, leaving damp trails on my skin. Every step brought the squelch of mud beneath my boots. Our compass needle spun uselessly, refusing to settle on north. The sun remained hidden behind perpetual mist. I navigated by the incline, always moving upward. "Do you hear that?" O'Connor suddenly asked, stopping in his tracks. We all went still, listening. "Hear what?" Lee asked. "Voices." O'Connor's face had gone pale. "Someone's calling my name." I heard nothing but the drip of water from leaves and our own breathing. "No one's calling, Doc," I said firmly. "It's just the wind." But there was no wind. O'Connor nodded, but his eyes kept flicking upward, scanning the canopy. "Something's following us," he whispered, "right above us. I can feel it." A sudden thunderstorm broke over us an hour later. Not unusual in the Highlands, but the timing felt deliberate. The rain came down in sheets, reducing visibility to mere feet. Lightning cracked, thunder shook the ground. "Everyone stay close," I shouted over the deluge. Ramirez was covering our rear. I turned to check on him during a lightning flash. Saw him scanning the trees, M60 ready. Another flash came seconds later. He was gone. Only his weapon remained, dropped in the mud. Around it, scattered like confetti, were feathers. Not normal bird feathers. These were larger, blue-black, with an iridescent sheen that no jungle bird possessed. The storm passed as suddenly as it had arrived. Night was falling again. Through the trees ahead, I spotted the dark mouth of a cave. "We'll shelter there," I decided, ignoring the nagging voice in my head that warned against it. Lee grabbed my arm. "I don't like it, Brooks. Something feels wrong." I pulled away. "We don't have a choice. Adams needs shelter, and we can't stay in the open after what happened to Ramirez." Military training won out over instinct. That was my first mistake. The cave mouth gaped like an open wound in the mountainside. Our flashlight beams seemed to be swallowed by the darkness rather than penetrating it. The air flowing from within felt unnaturally cool against my rain-soaked skin. "Stay close," I ordered, leading the way. The passage widened after 20 feet, opening into a larger chamber. My flashlight beam caught something metallic. A helicopter rotor blade, twisted and corroded with age. Beyond it, more debris, parts from different aircraft, spanning decades of design. Jesus, Lee whispered. There must be a dozen choppers worth of parts in here. But it was how they were arranged that turned my blood to ice. The pieces formed a perfect circle in the center of the cave. Within it, hanging from a natural stone column, were dog tags. Dozens of them, clinking softly like wind chimes in the draft. Adams had regained consciousness. She broke away from O'Connor and limped towards something on the ground. "Sir," she called, "you need to see this." It was a journal, but not like the one Lee had found. This was cruder, words scratched onto pieces of a poncho with what looked like burned wood. "They call it Zonga," I read aloud. "Mountain demon. Hunts from above. Collects metal and men. Been here since before the French, maybe before people. It learns. It watches. It mimics." The date at the top read, May 1967, 2 years ago. O'Connor had wandered toward the back of the cave. "It's here," he suddenly whispered. "I can see it." I swung my flashlight toward him. His face was a mask of terror, eyes fixed on something in the shadows beyond my beam's reach. "It's watching us," he said. Eyes, glowing eyes, in the dark. "There's nothing there, Doc," I said, but my voice lacked conviction. "It's right there," he screamed, backing away. "Wings! It has wings!" Before I could stop him, O'Connor turned and ran deeper into the cave system, his footsteps echoing off the walls. "Mike!" I shouted, starting after him with Lee right behind me. We found another chamber, walls covered with ancient paintings. Crude figures depicted warriors being carried off by winged, humanoid shapes. A warning written in the oldest language. Pictures. A horrifying screech echoed through the cave, so loud it made my ears ring. We found O'Connor's medical bag on the ground, shredded to ribbons, blood spattered across the stone. And behind us, something massive moved in the darkness, following our flashlight beams like a cat watching a laser pointer. We ran. Night had fallen completely by the time we made it back to our crash site. Adams could barely walk, even with Lee and me supporting her. Rain had started again, a steady downpour that washed away tracks and muffled sounds. Perfect hunting conditions. A light flickered through the trees ahead. Hope surged through me. "A search party," I breathed. "They found us." We stumbled into the clearing, and my hope died. Another helicopter lay crumpled against the trees, smoke still rising from its engine, despite the rain. A search and rescue bird, sent to find us. No one moved around it. No signs of survivors. "Where's the crew?" Lee whispered. Something crunched under my boot. I looked down to find a radio headset, crushed and bloodied. "We need to get out of here," Adams whimpered. "Now." Lightning flashed, and in that split second of illumination, I saw it, standing at the edge of the clearing, 9 feet tall at least. A face like a bat, long snout, pointed ears that twitched toward sound, eyes that reflected my flashlight when I swung it frantically in that direction. Massive wings folded against a muscular body covered in blue-black fur. Arms too long for its frame ended in hands with curved claws. Around its neck hung a macabre collection. Dog tags, watches, personal items. My breath caught when I spotted a familiar watch among them, my former co-pilot's from my previous crash. The one I thought had died in the fire. The thing cocked its head, studying us with unsettling intelligence. From its throat came sounds, perfect imitations of radio chatter, helicopter rotors, even human voices calling for help. The same sounds we'd been hearing since before our crash. It had lured us here. It had lured the search party, and God knows how many others over the years. Adams panicked. She drew her sidearm and fired 3 times. The creature moved with impossible speed, seeming to flicker like a bad TV signal. The bullets passed through where it had been. One moment it stood at the edge of the clearing. The next, it was beside Adams. She didn't even have time to scream before it snatched her into the darkness. Her cries faded rapidly into the distance, then cut off with sickening finality. "Run!" I shouted to Lee, pushing her toward our downed Huey. We made it inside, slamming the door, for what little good it would do. "What is that thing?" Lee gasped, her composure finally cracking. "I don't know," I answered, "but it's been hunting here a long time." The metal skin of the helicopter groaned as something heavy landed on top. Claws scraped across the surface, probing, testing, methodical, intelligent. A heavy impact rocked the cabin. Again. It was tearing through the fuselage with deliberate precision. I scrambled toward the cockpit, more out of habit than hope. My hand brushed against the exposed fuel line and froze. The line hadn't ruptured in the crash. It had been cut. No, not cut. Sliced by something sharp. 4 parallel marks, just like the ones we'd found on the tail section. "It sabotaged us," I whispered. "It brought us down on purpose." Another impact. Metal screamed as the roof began to tear open. Rain poured in through the widening gap, and silhouetted against the night sky, the creature looked down at us, its eyes reflecting our flashlights with eerie yellow luminescence. Not just hunting us, studying us, learning our technology, collecting us. The crashes were never accidents, and we weren't the first, just the latest in a long line of prey that stretched back years, maybe centuries. The creature reached one clawed hand into the opening, its movements almost gentle, almost curious, and I knew we wouldn't be the last. Dawn light filtered through the torn roof of our helicopter. We'd survived the night only because the creature had stopped its methodical dissection of our aircraft, disappearing into the jungle for hours, hunting elsewhere, or toying with us. I couldn't tell. "We can't stay here," Lee whispered, her voice hoarse. "It's just playing with us." I nodded, eyes fixed on the search helicopter. The radio might still work in that one. "We'd never make it together," she said, reading my thoughts. "It's watching." I took a deep breath. "I'll draw it away. You get to that radio." "That's suicide, Brooks." "I'm already haunted," I said, thinking of my previous crash, the faces of those I couldn't save. "What's one more ghost?" she argued, but eventually took our last flare and compass. We embraced briefly, both knowing what this meant. I burst from the helicopter, firing my sidearm into the air. "Come on, you bastard. You want me. Come get me." I ran, crashing through underbrush, feeling rather than seeing the massive shadow pass overhead. The beating of powerful wings sent downdrafts that flattened the vegetation around me. I reached a cliff edge, nowhere left to run. Turning, I faced it. The bat squatch landed 20 feet away, folding its wings. In daylight, it was even more terrifying and awe-inspiring. Its eyes held intelligence, recognition, almost mockery. In that moment, I understood. This creature had been hunting these mountains long before our war began, before any human war. We were just the latest invaders it was removing from its territory. As it approached, I squared my shoulders and faced my end with as much dignity as I could muster. 3 days later, a patrol found Lieutenant Karen Lee wandering delirious through the jungle, clutching a flare gun and babbling about flying monsters. Military doctors diagnosed her with traumatic stress disorder and jungle fever. Her story was filed away, another strange footnote in a war full of unexplained occurrences. My dog tags were found with her, but no other trace of me, or the other crew members. The second helicopter and its crew were similarly missing, without explanation. Years later, after the war, Lee received a package with no return address. Inside was a journal, my journal, documenting everything we'd experienced. Alongside it lay a piece of metal from our helicopter, marked with those distinctive claw marks. The final entry, written in my handwriting but not my style, contained a warning about unexplained crashes dating back to French colonial times, always with the same pattern. And on the last page, a message. It wears many faces now. It learns. It waits. And sometimes, it sends messages through old friends. The Central Highlands keep their secrets. And sometimes, what hunts there hunts forever. What lurks in the shadows of your local wilderness? Subscribe for more true military horror encounters and comment with your theories about what really happened to Chief Warrant Officer Brooks.